Welcome back to another message crawler update. Today we're talking about version 7. Yes, I spent last year and a half working on it, and now I'm finally ready to talk about it. Now, if you're new to this channel, before I had this version, or before I started working on this version, I was posting 2 videos per week. The weekend video was some kind of token video, and then middle of the week was a project update video. So that's how we're going to be doing going forward again. There are going to be 2 videos middle of the week where I talk about something I've been working on, my applications, something like that. And on the weekend, there's going to be a video talking about e-discovery related topic generally. So let's get back to talking about version 7. I'm going to throw in some kind of PowerPoint on the screen so I remember what I'm talking about, and you don't have to look at a zoomed in version of my face. So let's do that now. All right, so what we're gonna do today is talk about kind of the story. And by the way, there is no demo in this video. We're just kind of talking about past, present, future kind of deal. We'll do a demo. We'll start doing demos on the next video. All right. So we talk about how we got here, where we are, and where we're going. And I want to start with how we got here. All right. So originally, when RSMF file format came out, I thought like, hey, this is super cool. I want to be like one of the first people to generate RSMF files. And I thought about, well, how are we going to be doing this, right? And I thought, well, people are going to have probably like DAT files, right? We'll all use DAT files for metadata. So what I want to do is make a tool that will take a DAT file that's going to have whatever crazy random fields the forensic software or anything is going to export, and that's going to generate an RSMF file. And I want to give people tools to manipulate the data, because I'm sure those DAT files are going to be terrible. They're going to have problems, and people will need to manipulate it, map the fields to RSMF fields, and export them out. So that was always the goal of Message Crawler. And now you kind of see why I have all these field mappings like everywhere, right? Because originally it was meant to be to be used with DAT files with unknown fields that contain questionable data. Well, turned out to be my assumption was really wrong. And what I had to do for versions 1 through 5 is to add lots of other file import types. I had to, somebody's like, hey, can you look into the Slack JSON? That's kind of a big thing right now. People want to load that, convert to RSMF. So I'm like, well, it really wasn't gonna kind of get into that, but sure, let me look at that, And then somebody's like, oh, here's some Google data. Can you check that out? And I'm like, all right. And somebody sent something else. And so that's what's been happening in version 1 through 5 is I've been basically adding more and more of these different file types that people told me about or sent me sample data, and then I've reverse engineered them and added them to Message Crawler. The next thing I did is I added lots and lots of different tools to manipulate the data, right? So even though the data wasn't coming from these weird DAT files, it was still fields were all weird, right? I didn't know what the fields were. In fact, when I was parsing these JSONs and XMLs, I didn't know what I was parsing. I was just taking like, oh, here's a field that looks important, let's extract that. Oh, here's another field, let's extract that, right? So now I was just pulling them out and throwing them into a grid and basically letting users figure it out. And I was one of the users, right? I had to figure out for myself too, because, well, no one knew what all those crazy fields were. And so the last thing I did for version 1 through 5 is I added additional export file types. Not everyone uses relativity, so people wanted exports to PDFs, HTMLs, EMLs. So I kind of throw that in there so that people with other systems could also use the application. And PDFs were really successful. People wanted to just like export chats into one big PDF and send to somebody. So whether it's for litigation or whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's what people wanted. And that brings us to version 6, the current version. So the problem with version 5 is when you close the application, all the data disappears, right? All version 1 through 5 was everything was done in memory. The other issue was that you could not load a lot of data. You could load as much data as your computer has memory. So if you're dealing with large Slack export, you can only load so much. So version 6 needed a database, and that's what it got. That was like the major thing that I added, is now that when you close the application, data stays and you can do all kinds of other cool things with it. I spend more time on standardizing fields, right? So no longer I throw all the just random fields in. I kind of try to match them up and keep them consistent. Still some fields all the way on the right, like for Teams and for Slack, some weird stuff that had to be added because I didn't want to just throw it out and there was no standardized field for them. And then I added more tools. But the most important thing happened in version 6 was that database. But that still left us with some problems. And the problem number one, probably the biggest problem, is when you want to work with your data, when you want to either manipulate your fields or you want to export, you have to put data into the grid, right? You have to query it and have it loaded, and then all the tools run on the grid and they manipulate data there, whether they change values or export them, something like that. So that created a limitation that if you have like over 1 million documents and your computer doesn't have a lot of memory, you may not be able to just load it to grid, right? It's just not enough. So that is kind of currently a problem, and you have to break data into smaller chunks or something like that. A lot of people got around it by just buying really powerful computers, which is fine, but again, we still have that limitation. The other issue with version 6, too many options. So you see all these drop downs and checkboxes and things like that. And what's been happening, people just email me or call me and they're like, hey, we need this tool, we need that tool, we need this option, we need this to work like that. And sometimes I don't know whether they're right or wrong because we are all kind of learning about this short message data. So I'm like, all right, well, that seemed to make sense and that seemed to make sense. So let me add a checkbox, let me add an option, let me add something here. And it got too crazy where we now have so many options that it's too confusing. And a lot of them actually no longer needed. So what we need to do is throw some of them out and just make things simpler. And then the last thing is consistency between import types. Again, more can be done on standardizing fields, kind of figuring out how things work. So that's kind of what the current problems are of version 6. So now, how are we going to solve that, or how am I going to solve it in version 7? Well, for version 7, I am sort of starting over, right? I'm rewriting the application. I am keeping a lot of the code that does parsing. I spent so much time parsing all these files. All that code is being kept. RSMF generation code is being kept. But the overall database, the way front-end communicates with back-end, all that stuff is being completely rewritten. So what I did in last year and a half is I've been working on version 7. And the timeline is approximately like this. I spent 6 months trying out new technology that I'm going to use, which is in itself kind of crazy, right? If you ask your boss to like test something for 6 months, they'd be like, 6 months? Are you crazy? I give you 6 hours if you want to test something. So I worked for 6 months just testing it, seeing if it's even viable, right? At any point, this could have been a failure and I would have to scrap everything. Then the next 6 months, I was starting to put different pieces together, like search and this and that, different components, just to kind of see if, they can work. And then the following 6 months, I spent maybe like connecting things together and making sort of a usable application. So that's what I've been doing. It's kind of starting over, basically. Again, like I said, some code got copied over, of course. It's a new UI, new code. It's been repackaged for multi-threading, right? So pretty much everything you do is going to be multi-threaded. We'll be able to work with larger data sets. And the way we're going to do that is no longer you have to load data on your computer. You just simply have to tell by a form of a search where the data is and what operation you need performed. And so message crawler will go to the data set, do the thing and save it. And it'll do it in small chunks, so it doesn't need to load everything. I did say multi-threading. Yeah, well, multi-threading is going to be whenever possible. So if you have one XML file, that's going to be a single thread. But if you have Slack where you have multiple files, then we can multi-thread, and we can even scale across multiple computers. So that's, we're gonna have that. Less options, taking stuff out we don't need, less steps, and more automation. So again, simplifying the process. I am trying to build it so that we can do command line conversion. So you can configure like a JSON file, like a setting file, double click on thing, it's just gonna convert to the output and you're done. There's still issues with that process because data from different sources comes in broken, like specifically Microsoft, right? And this is probably a bad idea to kind of blindly just run the tool and take the results. You still should be QC in every step of the way, but it's possible. And in some data types, for example, like Facebook, where it's pretty clean, you should be able to do that. So that's more automation and also better searching. So we'll be able to either filter in those really big tables where we have millions of records, and we'll probably have like a full text search. So we'll see how that goes. I'm still not there yet. So those are the plans for version 7. What I'm planning on doing is starting a very limited beta test on January 2025. Not sure when this video is going to come out. This is December now. If you're interested in testing a proof of concept, non-production ready, probably is going to have lots of issues and difficult to use application, which only going to support 2 or 3 import types, let me know. I'll put you on the list. I'm guessing January 2025 we'll start giving this. I'll start giving this to people to kind of give that a try and get their feedback. So that is basically my update. Yep, thank you. Click to add subtitle here. January, gonna start testing it with some people, gathering feedback, seeing how people feel. It's probably gonna be a little bit too complicated to use. I'm planning to have like a skin on top of it to simplify some things even further, but this will be a starting point. Again, if you're interested, email me and we will talk. Just make sure you actually have time to spend testing and experimenting with this, because this will not be a production version you can use on cases. So if you don't have time, don't, just wait a little bit until I have a proper beta version. All right, thank you for checking out this update. I will see you on another.